so the first object in our solar system that we want to talk about is Earth's moon. And so there's a few things I'd like for you to know about it. So the number one thing that determined the fate of the moon today is its size. So if we go back to our original picture here that shows the size of the Earth there, and then notice the size of the moon. So the moon is roughly 1/4 the diameter of the Earth. So it is big in comparison to the size of the Earth, but it's a small object. And we said that small objects are going to cool off very quickly. So size is going to be the number one thing that determine the fate of the moon. Now, something that's interesting about the moon is its rotation rate and its orbital rate. So the moon spins once every 30 days, and it orbits the Earth once every 30 days. And so that's due to the gravity of the Earth pulling on the moon, and it has slowed down the rotation rate of the Earth, and it also has affected the rotation rate of the moon. So we say that the moon is tidally locked around the Earth, so that it's the rate at which it's spinning is the same as the rate at which it's orbiting, and that's due to the gravity of the Earth acting on the moon. Okay, now you should be able to tell me some things about the atmosphere of the moon. So now that you've got this little flow chart here, okay, you should be able to tell me that because the moon is so small, what does that tell you about the atmosphere of the moon? Okay, the moon is small, doesn't have much gravity, so it can't hold on to much of an atmosphere. So the moon has a very, very thin atmosphere. It does have an atmosphere, so it does have some gases that are held down, but it's like 1/1,000,000th of the atmosphere of the Earth. So for all intents and purposes, you can say that it doesn't have an atmosphere, but it really does, a very, very thin one. All right, so if it has a thin atmosphere, what does that tell you about the pressure of that atmosphere? Very, very low. Okay, now what about the temperature on the moon? Well, the temperature on the moon varies between negative 130 degrees Celsius up to positive 120 degrees Celsius. So that means that if you are on the day side of the moon, so the part of the moon that is getting sunlight, it is incredibly hot. It is hotter than the boiling point of water. If, however, you are in any part of the moon that doesn't get any sunlight, then all of a sudden the temperature is negative 130 degrees Celsius. It's either one or the other. So you don't really have any in-between temperatures on the moon. So it's either incredibly cold in the shade or it's incredibly hot in the sun. So what could be causing this? Okay, so I want you to think about what would it be like if you lived in a desert environment, and let's say that there's no clouds in the sky, and you're in the middle of, let's say, the state of Arizona in North America. So during the daytime, it's incredibly hot. Okay, at nighttime, again, let's say that there's no clouds, it's incredibly cold. Okay, because the atmosphere helps to hold in heat. And so if you have a thin atmosphere, then that means that during the daytime, all of that energy from the sun is going to be coming through and hitting the ground. and there isn't going to be much of an atmosphere to block it. At night, all of that heat is going to escape into the air or into space, and so there isn't going to be much of an atmosphere to help hold in that heat. So either incredibly hot or incredibly cold. Also, and you'll notice that the moon does have an internal structure. So it does have a core, and it does have a mantle, and it does have a crust to it. The picture that is to the right of that shows the surface features on the moon. And the moon is going to have two different kinds of rocks. So it's going to have dark rocks that are composed of basalt, and then light rocks which are also composed of an igneous type rock called a northsite. The original crust of the moon is the white part, and so that is going to be called the lunar highlands. When that got hit by an asteroid early in the formation of the moon, it would punch a hole through the white crust into the mantle, and then basaltic lava would ooze out of and would fill in the crater. That's the darker parts of the moon. So that's going to be called the Maria. And so Galileo named it that. Maria means oceans. So the moon does not have oceans, but it does have these two different colored parts to it. Okay, so what about plate tectonics? You should be able to tell me. It's a very small object. It cooled off rapidly, and so it doesn't really have plate tectonics. It does have moonquakes. So occasionally things shift around on the inside of the moon, and so it does have quakes, but it's not going to have plates that are moving, bumping into each other, and things like that. All right, so that's kind of a summary of what the moon is like. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the planet Mercury.